Friends, today our focus is going to be on on insolvency and bankruptcy code. Yesterday we looked at, to start with, background behind some of the major economic reforms which have been brought out by the government of India in last few years. Three prominent ones which directly concern every one of us are the insolvency and bankruptcy code, valuation rules, and proficiency test for being appointed on the board of a company as an independent director. Yesterday we also looked at threadware as to what is valuation, what is value, what is valuation, why to carry out valuation, and what is the purpose of the valuation. That is what we understood. And we also understood yesterday as to how to prepare this very complex and extremely competitive exam of valuation exam yesterday. Now, today our focus, as I said, is going to be on insolvency. So let me share with you as to what is the agenda that we have for today's session. We would start with background on India's economic progression from independence. Now, friends, as I was mentioning yesterday, as professionals, we have multitudes of responsibilities. We have responsibility towards ourselves, we have responsibility towards our families, we have responsibility towards our society, our profession, and the country as a whole. And therefore, if we have to discharge this obligation, this duty, this responsibility towards our nation as company secretaries or cost accountants or chartered accountants or lawyers or any other category of professionals, it is extremely important for every one of us to understand and comprehend in a very systematic manner as to how the economic progression has taken place in our country since independence. How has it progressed? Where we have reached, and from here, where we are likely to go, and how this journey has been, how turbulent this journey has been, and what have been the reasons for the turbulence in this journey. What is the purpose behind discussing this? There are two purposes. Purpose number one, first of all, as a professional, as a finance, accounts, and legal professional, it is absolutely imperative on the part of every one of us to really have a good understanding of the economy of the country. And why the economy of the country? Because as company secretaries or chartered accountants or cost accountants, ultimately what we are doing, directly or indirectly, we are helping growth of economy of this country. तो अगर आप employment में हैं, so through the employment you are helping the companies for which you are working. You are helping those companies to add more value to the GDP of the country. And if you are in practice as a company secretary or chartered accountant or cost accountant, you are helping your clients in adding more value to the GDP. So as professionals, and this is very important, as professionals, that is our main role and responsibility, and that is to contribute to the growth of the economy, growth of the GDP of the country. So that is reason number one as to why do we need to have good understanding as to how the India's economy has progressed since independence till this date and how it's going to go in future. Number two, we also need to understand the economic progression of our country so as to know as to what kind of mistakes, errors have been committed in the past, knowingly or unknowingly, and why is that so? And that is because somebody has very rightly said, and he said that If we do not learn from the history, we are condemned to repeat. And please remember, not every time we will get a second chance. So that is the second reason as to why do we need to have good understanding of India's economic progression since independence. In this process, we will also understand as to what is the role and responsibility of all of us as professionals. Then we would look at the purpose behind Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. Today, our focus is going to be to understand what the IBC Code is and also how to prepare for it so as to qualify for this exam. And to achieve that purpose, it is absolutely imperative and necessary that we must be very clear in our mind. We must be crystally clear in our mind as to what is the purpose behind IBC. What is the purpose or the objective IBC is supposed to achieve? That is what we would discuss. Then we would be looking at some of the aspects of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code to give you a heads up. Friends, having passed the insolvency exam, having passed the evaluation exam, and practicing as insolvency professional, as valuation professional, my idea behind this session is to share some of the learnings which I have gained with all of you so that you are able to take advantage of these learnings and thereby are able to not only pass the exam, pass these two exams, but also are able to do well in your profession as a valuation professional or as an insolvency professional as and when you become a member. So we would be, to give you a heads up, I will discuss with you some of the provisions, some of the aspects of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. I'm sure this heads up that you will get during this session will definitely help you in your preparation for the insolvency exam. And why is that so? Because when you are reading a new topic or new subject first time, there are always a lot of confusions and it takes longer to understand. But if you have a pre-idea as to what the IBC is all about, your comprehension, your understanding, and your interest in that subject becomes even more deeper than what it would have been otherwise. So would give you some heads up. Then we would look at the strategy to prepare and how to prepare topic wise, same way as we did yesterday. Now I'm sure friends, some of you who are there on this session today must have been there yesterday also, and I am also sure that some of you may not have been there yesterday, and some of you who have not been there yesterday but are there today. So I will try and also keep touching upon some of the key things that I discussed yesterday, and also discuss them in brief today so that every one of us are on the same page. And I would also like you to excuse me for my bad throat today. So in case if you find me coughing a little bit more often, please excuse me. Then we would look at what are the professional opportunities for the insolvency professionals and what are the kind of skill sets required to be a successful insolvency professional. So this is the agenda, friends, that we have for today, and we would also look at future for the valuation profession that we wanted to discuss yesterday, but to manage the time well, we have shifted that topic for today's discussion. Purpose of these sessions still remain the same as yesterday. The whole objective of these two sessions, yesterday and today, is to help all the future aspirants pass these two exams and be empowered to serve the purpose for which these two reforms have been brought out by the government of India, and so also be able to do well for themselves. So this is the purpose that we have for both these sessions. Let us look at, friends, India's economic progression since independence. We got independence on 15th August 1947, and we all are aware of it. What was the condition at the time when we got the independence? It was divided India, it was partitioned India, There was agony of partition all over. The economy was in shambles. Industry and trades were in shambles. There was hardly any infrastructure worth its name in this country. But one thing that was good at that point in time, and that was everyone in this country was having a very optimistic outlook towards future, a very positive outlook towards future. It was perhaps first time that everyone in this country thought कि अब हमारे अच्छे दिन आएंगे. Having gained independence on 15th August 1947, everyone in this country was expecting that this country now will have all good days to come. Two gentlemen, two persons who were at the helms of affairs at that time. One was Bapu and other gentleman was Panditji. Bapu thought that India should attain self-reliance through the process of focusing on micro sector, mini sector and small sector. Panditji thought that India should lay emphasis on massive industrialization. India should set up large projects. So you could see that there was a difference between the thinking of Bapu and Panditji as far as the approach for achieving economic growth of this country. But ultimately, both of them agreed for one thing, and that one thing was India should become a socialist country. So, as a policy for economic administration of this country, we decided to be a socialist country. And friends, please remember, there is nothing wrong being a socialist country or a communist country or a capitalist country. There is nothing wrong. Socialism is good, communism is also good, capitalism is also good, so long as intentions of the leadership at the helms of affairs are pure and clear. And what intention? Intention to do well for the last person, for every person in the country. But unfortunately, looks like in hindsight that the approach of being a socialist country perhaps proved to a nemesis for all the problems that followed in this country subsequently. So as a socialist country का क्या मतलब है? Socialist country का मतलब ये है, government tells to the people, look gentlemen, we will not only run the government, but we will also run the business. And the reason as to what they would proclaim for being a socialist country, वो ये कहेंगे कि अगर हम सोशलिस्ट कंट्री नहीं बनते हैं, अगर हम कैपिटलिस्ट कंट्री बनते हैं, तो इसका मतलब क्या होगा कि कुछ लोग बहुत ज़्यादा रिच हो जाएंगे और बहुत सारे लोग बहुत पुअर हो जाएंगे. एंड दैट इज़ वाई द लीडर्स एट दैट टाइम सेड दैट वी आर गोइंग टू बी अ सोशलिस्ट कंट्री. As a result of this policy, friends, what did we do? We restricted the private entrepreneurship in this country. So what the government would say to the people? The government would say to the people that we will set up the big businesses. Small businesses, my small businesses, we will leave for you people. We became a controlled economy. And we became a controlled economy for the same reason. From the same reason कि कहीं ऐसा ना हो कि कुछ लोग बहुत पैसे वाले हो जाएं और बहुत सारे लोग गरीब हो जाएं. तो हम we became a controlled economy. India, as a result of this policy, had in this country license Raj and inspector Raj. Meaning what? Meaning anything that you wanted to do in this country, you had to go to some ministry, some office in Delhi, take a license, and then only you could produce. And it was a license Raj. So if you happen to set up a factory somewhere, anywhere in the country, you will have so many inspectors visiting to you every now and then. कभी PF इंस्पेक्टर आएगा, कभी फैक्ट्री इंस्पेक्टर आएगा, कभी इनकम टैक्स इंस्पेक्टर आएगा, कभी सेल्स टैक्स इंस्पेक्टर आएगा, कभी ईएसआई इंस्पेक्टर आएगा, कभी शॉप एंड एस्टेब्लिशमेंट इंस्पेक्टर आएगा. एंड प्लीज रिमेंबर, all these inspectors will visit the business unit, the small business new unit, not to help them, but to help themselves. And you would understand what I mean when I say to help themselves. As a result of this, the growth of country was completely throttled. And I'm sure you can understand. I'm sure you can understand what you need for growth. For growth, what we need is more production, more manufacturing, expansion of economic activity. If you do that, then you would grow. But if you control the economic activity, if you put the license Raj, inspector Raj on the economic activity, you can't grow. On top of it, we were giving incentive for being small, inefficient and productive. How do we did it? Let me tell you. And I'm sure all of you would be aware. There was a law in this country which of course went away after the GST, and the law was that the government would tell the industry, of course the limit would keep on changing from time to time. So the government will tell the industry, look gentlemen, if your turnover is less than 1 crore, we will exempt you from excise duty. But if your production goes beyond 1 crore, we will charge you excise duty. That means अगर आप ज़्यादा प्रोड्यूस करेंगे तो हम आपके ऊपर एक्साइज की पेनल्टी ठोक देंगे, और अगर आप 1 करोड़ से आपका प्रोडक्शन टर्नओवर कम रहेगा तो हम आपको एक्साइज ड्यूटी से एग्जेम्प्ट कर देंगे. एंड यू कैन अंडरस्टैंड, इट इज़ लाइक कि कल कोई आपका छोटा भाई भतीजा स्कूल से घर लौटे और आप उसको बोलें कि भाई देखो, अगर तुम्हारे मार्क्स 33 से कम आए तो तुमको मिलेगी साइकिल, और अगर तुमने 33 के ऊपर मार्क्स लेके आए तो होगी तुम्हारी पिटाई. आई एम श्योर यू कैन अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट द बॉय वुड डू. Boy would happily keep his marks lower than 33 without worrying about anything. But will a businessman do? Obviously, businessman will not reduce the output, will not bring the turnover down. So what he would do? He would, in the same factory, the moment he sees that his turnover is going beyond 1 crore, in the same factory, he will have 2 units under 2 different names. 50% turnover here, 50% turnover there. And thereby he would try and keep his overall turnover less than 1 crore. You think he would succeed? Of course not. Why? An excise inspector will come to the factory and he would ask you, who's the owner of factory X? You would say, I am the owner of factory X. He would ask you, who's the owner of factory Y? You would say, I am the owner of the factory Y. And then he would tell you, look, you are the owner of both the factories. Even both these factories are 2 separate entities. Since you are the owner of both the factories, and therefore the combined turnover has to be taken into account, which is more than 1 crore, and that is you pay the excise duty. Now tell me, a businessman, what will he do? Will he pay the excise duty? Of course not. He will simply ask the inspector, sir, what do you want? So, because of the policies that we adopted post-independence, what we did, we gave encouragement to become small, we gave encouragement to become unproductive, and we gave encouragement to become inefficient. And this directly and indirectly resulted into corruption, and there was primacy of politics over economics. Hoarders, black marketeers, brokers, and intermediaries amassed wealth. And because of all these policies, I'm sure you can very easily visualize what happened. India became a seller's market. And why did India become a seller's market? Because even at the time of independence, our population was 33 crore. So India was a huge market at that time also. But because of the license policy, controlled economy, what we did, we controlled the supply. So demand was huge, supply was controlled, and therefore anything that you produced in this country was sold like a hot cake. And this is how India became a seller's market. Now please understand what happens in case of a seller's market. In case of seller's market, what happens? Number one, you don't feel the need to innovate. Obviously, because whatever you are producing is getting sold. So you have no incentive to innovate. So you would keep on producing whatever you have been producing. Since you are in a seller's market, you are able to sell everything that you produce. Obviously, how will customer be treated as? Customer will be treated as कष्ट से मर यानी कि customer. How will a consumer be treated as? Consumer would be treated as कौन जा मर, that means consumer. And all this attitude and approach led to very poor service and products that we produced in this country post-independence. Just to give you an example, friends, it is absolutely very, very essential for every one of us, whether as a company secretary or as a chartered accountant or as a cost accountant or as an MBA or as a lawyer or any other professional for that matter, to understand as to how the economy has progressed since independence, what kind of trouble we got into, and why did we got into those trouble. I think is very, very important for every one of us to understand, and that is what I'm trying to do in few minutes. So the example of poor products and services, in this country there was one scooter, और आपको मालूम है इंटरेस्टिंगली वो स्कूटर पूरे पूरे कंट्री में एक ही स्कूटर बनता था, और उस स्कूटर की डिमांड इतनी थी कि उसकी सप्लाई वाज फार टू शॉर्ट ऑफ द डिमांड ऑफ दैट स्कूटर. इसीलिए हिंदुस्तान में एक समय था कि जब किसी घर में बच्चा पैदा होता था तो उसके बच्चे के पिताजी जैसे ही बच्चा पैदा हुआ सीधे मार्केट भागते थे और वो देखते थे कि वो स्कूटर की वर्कशॉप, स्कूटर की का शोरूम किधर है. क्यों भागते थे? स्कूटर बुक करने के लिए. अब आप सोचेंगे क्या इंडिपेंडेंट हिंदुस्तान में इतने एडवांस बच्चे पैदा होने शुरू हो गए कि जैसे ही बच्चे पैदा हुए स्कूटर चलाएंगे? नो, ऑफ कोर्स नॉट. बट देन व्हाई वुड ही बुक द स्कूटर एज सुन एज द बर्थ ऑफ द चाइल्ड विल टेक प्लेस? एंड दैट इज बिकॉज उसको मालूम था कि जब तक उसका बच्चा 18 साल का होगा तभी तक जाके उसको स्कूटर की डिलीवरी मिलेगी. सो फॉर अदर स्कूटर, a simple product for daily need, people had to wait in this country for 18 years. And there are so many examples. Of poor standards and poor products and poor services. And you can imagine, there was also a time in this country that for a telephone in this country, remember, was a status symbol. If you had a telephone, you were a big person. If I did not have a telephone, I was a small person. And and for getting the telephone again, you had to wait for 10-15 years in this country, post-independence. And please remember, and where are we today? Where everybody in this country, you can see, is carrying 2-3 phones, 2-3 mobiles with them. Why? Because of the policies that we pursued in this country in the name of socialistic pattern of society. Sometimes when I look and analyze, I really wonder. जब हम पीछे मुड़ के देखते हैं, और आई एम श्योर अगर आप पीछे मुड़ के देखेंगे तो आपके भी ध्यान में आएगा कि एज अ कंट्री व्हाट वी वर डूइंग, वर वी वर्किंग फॉर प्रोग्रेशन और वी वर वर्किंग फॉर रिग्रेशन. And let's look at some example. For decades altogether in this country, there were only 3 IIMs, Indian Institutes of Management, only 3 institutes of management, जबकि हर साल 2 लाख से भी ज़्यादा बच्चे उन एग्ज़ाम के लिए एस्पायर करते थे, और उसमें से मुश्किल से 1000-2000 बच्चों का सिलेक्शन होता था, बाकी बच्चे डिसअपॉइंट होके अपने अपने घर जाते थे. सो व्हेन देयर वाज such a huge demand for education, we could, for decades altogether, we had only 3 institutes of IIMs and 5 institutes of IIT and only 1 All India Medical Science Institute. And that is what really make you wonder, as a country, what we were trying to do. Were we trying to progress or were we trying to regress? Because if we were trying to progress, that means what? That means we would have opened IIMs and IITs in every district place. Because only when there's a high level of education, only when there are skilled and educated manpower, then only the country would progress, not otherwise. There was a provision in case if a bank wanted to open a new branch, the branch needed to go to Reserve Bank of India, apply for a license for one simple branch, And only after the bank would get a license, the bank would be able to open the branch. Bank is the heart of economic activity of a nation, any nation. And for opening the branches, we had the system of license. Freebies to make people lazy and and dependent. License to start any business activity. License to produce and manufacture goods and produce. So अगर आप कुछ बनाना है, take a license. Penalty for being efficient. तो अगर आपकी कैपेसिटी 1 लाख यूनिट्स बनाने की है और अगर आपने 1,30,000 यूनिट बना दिए तो आपको पेनल्टी भरनी पड़ेगी. हो सकता है आपका लाइसेंस ही कैंसिल हो जाए. यानी कि आपने जो भी इन्वेस्टमेंट किया है, जितने भी अमाउंट का किया हो, अगर आपने ज़्यादा बना दिया तो आपका लाइसेंस कैंसिल और आपका पूरा इन्वेस्टमेंट बिकम यूजलेस. For decades, and please pay attention, friends, because we are professionals, we are chartered accountants, accountants, company secretaries, lawyers, and MBAs. For decades altogether, or rather throughout, our balance of trade and balance of payment situation was never positive. Our imports were always higher than the exports that we were making. Our our balance of payment, that means the amount that we needed to pay outside and the amount that was to come inside, was always adverse. So the balance of trade and balance of payment position for all these years has been negative and adverse. And the worst is, despite all this, in this country, we were importing goods worth 10 lakh crore के imports हम करते थे चाइना से. ये सब होने के बावजूद कि हमारी बैलेंस ऑफ ट्रेड पोजीशन खराब है, हमारी बैलेंस ऑफ पेमेंट सिचुएशन खराब है, एंड देयरफॉर instead of laying emphasis on development of the domestic industry, what we were doing, we were importing goods from outside. And that means we were not working for strengthening economy of this country, rather we were working for the strengthening the economy of the China. And that is what really make you wonder as to, as a country, what we were trying to do. Were we trying to progress or were we trying to regress? And you can understand, if this is what we did in this country, knowingly or unknowingly, intentionally or intentionally, what would happen? Year was 1991. Chandrasekhar was Prime Minister. Yashwant Sinha was the Finance Minister. And what were the headlines in the newspaper? The headlines in the newspaper were India at the threshold of international bankruptcy. 15 अगस्त को जब देश आज़ाद हुआ, everybody in this country was hoping good days to follow, अच्छे दिन to come. But since 15th August 1947 to the year 1991, what did we gain in this country? We gained international bankruptcy. Our forex reserves were just enough to take care of our imports of 11 days. We did not have any money left with us. We were about to tell the world, gentlemen, pardon us, excuse us, we are bankrupt, we are insolvent, we have no money, we cannot pay you, please forgive us. Now that was the situation that we reached to in 1991, starting from the independence of this country. And why was that? And that is because the kind of policies that we followed in this country, the kind of approach that we followed towards the growth of this country was absolutely full of flaws. And that is what one can say definitely in hindsight. And not say in hindsight, but also learn lessons from there so as to not repeat the same mistakes again in future. So what we did, we said, all right, we will not give in. We will not surrender. Let us fight it out. Let us fight it out. और दोस्तों मैं आपको बताऊं कि दो चीज़ें हिंदुस्तान ने कभी नहीं की. हिंदुस्तान शुरू से लेकर आज तक, two things we have never done. And what those two things are? Those two things are, number one, we as a nation has never attacked any other nation anywhere in the world. That is number one that we have done. And number two, what we have done is we have never surrendered in front of anyone. We have never give up. We have never given. We have already always fought. As a country, we have a very strong, resilient power. So we said, all right, for whatever reason, known or unknown, knowingly or unknowingly, we have come into trouble. Let us fight it out. And therefore, we went to IMF. और हमने IMF से कहा, सर हम प्रॉब्लम में हैं, हमें मदद करिए. IMF ने हमसे कहा, ऑफ कोर्स we will do it, we will help you, because that is what our job is. As International Monetary Fund, as World Bank, that is our job, is to help the economies of the world anywhere. So we would certainly help you. But what is the guarantee that the money that we give to you to support you in this hour of your crisis will come back to us? So we said, all right, tell us, sir, what do you want as a guarantee? And friends, IMF told us the only thing that we can accept from you as guarantee is your gold. And my friends, 40 metric tons of gold. 40 metric tons of gold was flown from India, placed with the lenders to support India at that point in time, and it was against the security of this 40 metric tons of gold. IMF said, all right, we would help you. We would help you. So the aircrafts full of gold flew from India carrying this 40 metric tons of gold so as to support India. IMF said, all right, wait a minute. Your gold is fine as a security, but please remember, we are not in the business of money lending. So we said, all right, what do you want now? IMF said, what we want is, remember, your gold is okay as a security, but please remember, if you continue to follow the kind of policies that you have followed in the past, you are going to be deeper in the ditch rather than being out of it. So we said, please tell us what you want now. And IMF said that you will have to reform. और अगर मैं हिंदी में कहूँ तो IMF ने हमसे कहा कि भाई साहब आपको सुधरना होगा. And please remember, that is how, under the mandate of IMF, World Bank, and the lenders who supported in the hour of that crisis, under the mandate from these organizations, we started reforms in this country in 1991, and those were the first reforms in this country. Now, a question that comes and discussed many times as to who should be given credit for the reforms of 1991. तो लोग कहते हैं, should the credit go to Chandrasekhar? Should the credit go to Yashwant Sinha? Should the credit go to Narasimha Rao? Or should the credit go to Manmohan Singh for the reforms of 1991? Of course, friends, it was under the leadership of Narasimha Rao that the reforms of 1991 were implemented, and therefore some credit is definitely due to him. But let me tell you, friends, the credit of the reforms of 1991 does not go to these politicians. It does not go to IMF. It does not go to the World Bank. Then I'm sure you must be wondering, then who should be given the credit for the reforms of 1991 in this country? And friends, remember, the credit for the reforms of 1991 goes to every unscrupulous politician of this country, every unscrupulous bureaucrat of this country, every unscrupulous businessman of this country, every unscrupulous professional of this country, every media person, every unscrupulous media person of this country. And therefore, the credit for the reforms of 1991 to go to all the unscrupulous people, because combined together उन्होंने देश की इतनी हालत खराब कर दी कि रिमेंबर कि रिफॉर्म्स के अलावा हमारे पास में कोई और रास्ता नहीं था. मीनिंग व्हाट? मीनिंग इवन इफ Narasimha Rao was not to be the prime minister, somebody else would have been the prime minister. Remember, he too had no choice but to implement the reforms as dictated by IMF, as mandated by the World Bank. And this is what we must remember, that the credit for the reforms of 1991 goes to all the unscrupulous people, because सबने मिलके देश की इतनी बर्बादी कर दी कि रिफॉर्म्स के अलावा हमारे पास में और कोई रास्ता नहीं था. तो 1991 के रिफॉर्म्स हुए. What was the impact of the liberalization, privatization and globalization, the reforms of 1991? The impact was there was massive increase in consumerism with umpteen choices to the consumer. So जो एक सिचुएशन थी कि जब आपको स्कूटर के लिए 18 साल वेट करना पड़ता था, because of the reforms the licenses were done away with to a very large extent. Of course, Inspector Raj and would still continue, but broadly the licenses were done away with. As a result of this, anybody and everybody could produce anything and everything that you wanted to produce in this country, unlike in the past when you needed to go and take the license. So what was the transformation that happened post the reforms of 1991? Number one, demolition of license and Inspector Raj. Privatization of PSUs in this country started, and very rightly so. Remember, there is nothing wrong in privatization of PSUs, more so when they are incurring losses. Because if a company is incurring losses, remember that company is a drain, that company is a liability, that company is a responsibility. That company is eating the economy of the country, and therefore there is nothing wrong if a business is incurring losses, that it should be sold and given to somebody who can run it profitably. And that is also the crux of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. Implementation of other reforms, integration of India's economy with the global economy, because it was around the same time that we also had the WTO coming in, and therefore there was increasingly tougher competition. And why increasingly tougher competition? Because the internet was also coming at that point in time, and therefore because of internet there was explosion of information. You wanted to know anything about anyone across the globe, you could very easily get. Increase in educational facilities, focus on building of overall infrastructure. First time one could see that there was some thought in terms of building the infrastructure, and progressive conversion into a market driven economy. So 1991 की reforms का एक impact ये हुआ कि जो sellers की economy थी India, which was a sellers market, now slowly it was converting into a buyers market. Slowly it was becoming a market driven economy. What was the positive impact of the LPG, liberalization, privatization and globalization? The positive impact was home loans were available in 24 hours. Wider choices to consumer. Unlike in the past, you had only one scooter. Now, post 1991 reforms, the things changed so well that you had so many scooters and the motorcycles available to purchase from. Media and knowledge explosion. Increase in accountability at all levels, a reduction in red tapeism to a large extent, good inflow of foreign capital. Our forex reserves post 1991 reached to the tune of $300 billion. So once we were in a situation where our imports were just enough to take care of our imports of 11 days. Our forex reserves were just enough to take care of our import requirements of 11 days. That size swelled to $300 billion. India started becoming a superpower in IT, and government also started developing infrastructure. ये सब तो हुआ. अब देखिए ये चीज़ हमको समझने की है और समझना बहुत ज़रूरी है कि 1991 के बाद चीज़ें बदली. Things transformed, but not really as much as it should have been. So कुछ चीज़ें तो बदल गई, but few things did not change. And what were the things that did not change? Number one, farmers continued to commit suicide, notwithstanding the reforms of 1991 in this country. Progress in corruption continued. The only difference was कि पहले जो स्कैम होते थे वो हजारों लाखों के होते थे, अब जो स्कैम होने लगे वो लाखों करोड़ों में होने लगे. Few corrupt and unscrupulous politicians, bureaucrats, businessmen, professionals, bankers, and media people continued to prosper despite the reforms of 1991. 90% of countries' wealth continued to be in the hands of the 10% of the people, and 10% of the wealth of the country was in the hands of the 90% of the people, and that continued despite the fact that India had implemented reforms of 1991. Lakhs and crores of black money was stashed away outside India in foreign banks. Law and order position continued to decline in the country even after the reforms of 1991. Legislature, as the fourth pillar, continued to dominate the other three pillars of our constitution. Now this did not change despite the reforms. Economy progressively started turning into a buyer's market from the seller's market, but primacy of politics over economics continued. And friends, this you and me as a professional really got to be vigilant, and we really got to be attentive. As a professional, it is our responsibility as a professional, as chartered accountants, cost accountants, company secretaries, lawyers, doctors, engineers, architects, MBAs, it is our responsibility that we need to educate people about the importance of economics over politics. Because if we don't do that, people with a crooked mind will continue to have primacy of economics over politics, primacy of politics over economics. As a result of that, the economy of the country would continue to suffer. And if the economy of the country is suffering, remember, every one of us is also going to suffer as a result of that. Policy of appeasement of few sections continued in this country, both bank centric administration and governance. Even the political mindset was still the same as prior to 1991. तो रिफॉर्म्स तो किए 1991 में, लेकिन जो पॉलिटिकल माइंडसेट था वो पॉलिटिकल माइंडसेट अभी भी यही था कि किस तरह से कुर्सी पर वापस आया जाए. ग्रोथ was not the concern. The development of the people was not the concern. Growth of the economy was not the concern. What was the concern? How to come back to the power again and again and again and again. That political mindset continued even after the reforms of 1991. People started, as a result of all this, people started feeling frustration from corruption and policy paralysis, looking for a change at the helms of the nation. तो ये जब policy paralysis, scams, and all this was happening, what happened that the situation became so worse even after the reforms of 1991 that by the beginning of 2014 we perhaps were at yet another economic debacle. But then election came around the corner, and therefore the attention from another crisis of 1991, instead of that crisis taking place, the focus got shifted, and the focus got shifted from the economic crisis to the election of 2014. Friends, here we have to ask few questions to ourselves. What are the questions that we have to ask? We need to ask and understand as to what are the four pillars of democracy. And we all know the four pillars of democracy are legislative, executive, judiciary, and media, which is also known as the fourth state. Another question that we need to ask, obviously, all these four pillars of the democracy of our country have the responsibility. And responsibility of what? Responsibility to ensure development of the entire nation, development of the entire economy, development of every person in the country without any kind of differentiation between the caste, creed, and religion. All of them have this responsibility. But unfortunately or incidentally, there have been many instances in the past that every one of us are aware as to at times the legislative failed, at times the executive failed, at times the judiciary also could not do much, and nothing to say about the media. Nothing to say about the media. So the question is, if all these four pillars of the democracy fail, then what is the alternative? And that is where we have a role. And the alternative is the fifth pillar. And what is the fifth pillar? Fifth pillar is the group of professionals. Fifth pillar for the democracy of any country any democratic country are is professionals, accounts professionals, law professionals, finance professionals, medical professionals, technology professionals. Now, these put together are the fifth pillar. Meaning what? Meaning, if this fifth pillar of the democracy is awakened, is enlightened, is vigilant, is performing its task and its duty, it can ensure that the other four pillars of the democracy do their job without any failure and fiasco and any kind of wrongdoing. And that is the reason, friends, after the after 2014, a new leadership came, new government came, and this government came with a different kind of a mindset. And what is the mindset? The mindset is to give due recognition to the professionals, to give due responsibilities to the professionals. And why? Because it was thought that these professionals will work as a professional and will ensure that even if the other four pillars of the democracy fail, these four pillars will ensure that as far as the growth and development of the economy is concerned, it is fully taken care of. Friends, I am sure all of you would agree with me. The kind of corruption that we have had in this country, the kind of malfunctioning on the economic front that we have had in the country since independence, don't you think somewhere the professionals who could have done a much better a job, instead of being a kingmaker, they allowed themselves to be after these four pillars, and in the process they let the wrong things to happen. Some of them, I'm not saying every one of them, some of them. So post May 2014, a new set of reforms have started happening in this country, and I'm just sharing some of them with you, but they are not all. Our focus is on IBC, our focus is on valuation, and our focus is on independent director, because that's where all of us as professionals are directly interested. And friends, that is where we have to remember that the government has given us the responsibility. So as I was telling you yesterday, and I would like to repeat it once again, that being an insolvency professional, being an independent director, being a valuation professional is not a matter of honor, is not a matter of privilege, it's not an award, it's not a recognition. Rather, it is an obligation, it is a duty, it is an obligation, it is a duty, it is a responsibility towards the growth of the economy of this country. And that is the reason why the government has shown that trust, faith and confidence in every one of us. It was in this background and what I mentioned to you yesterday about the NPAs, the government brought out the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016. Before we move forward and understand different provisions of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, to give you a heads up about the background of the insolvency, what about the contents of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, let us understand what is the purpose behind IBC. Why? Because if you have to become an insolvency professional, if I have to become an insolvency professional, I must be completely clear in my mind as to what is the purpose of the IBC. If I do not know what is the purpose of IBC, remember, howsoever hard I may try, I will not be able to deliver what I am supposed to be delivering. तो IBC को क्यों लाया गया? IBC को लाया गया so that number one, to stop further damage to the economy because of NPAs. And I am sure it is a non-fact that there has definitely been a control on further deterioration of the NPA situation in this country post Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. Purpose number two, recycle the wealth locked up in stressed assets and the NPAs. So IBC is to turn the closed companies around or the companies which are heading towards insolvency to stop from heading towards insolvency, rather resolve the insolvency so that they can start contributing to the economy. प्रोवाइड बूस्ट टू द इकोनॉमी। एंड सीधी सी बात है, जो कंपनियां बंद पड़ी हैं अगर वो कंपनियां चालू होंगी, वो कंपनियां चालू होंगी तो वो कंपनियां प्रोड्यूस करेंगी, वो कंपनियां प्रोड्यूस करेंगी तो उसका आउटपुट आएगा, उसका आउटपुट आएगा तो जीडीपी का एडिशन होगा, वो कंपनियां प्रोड्यूस करेंगी तो और लोगों को एम्प्लॉयमेंट मिलेगा, एम्प्लॉयमेंट मिलेगा तो इसका मतलब अगेन इट इज गोइंग टू गिव बूस्ट टू द इकोनॉमी। दैट वाज द पर्पस नंबर 3। पर्पस नंबर 4, चेंज द माइंडसेट ऑफ बिजनेस कम्युनिटी एट लार्ज। Pre-Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, managements of businesses all over the country took the control for granted. They thought that once I promote a company and once I hold a certain percentage of shares in my hand, I am going to be the owner and the boss of this company for all times to come. Now that mindset today is completely broken. And why that mindset is completely broken? Because now the business community in this country have realized that the control of a business cannot be taken for granted. And why the control of a business cannot be taken for granted? Because there have been number of cases which I am sure all of you would be aware as to where biggest of the corporates in this country changed hands. And I will just give you one example of SR Steel. SR Steel belonged to the Ruiyas. Ruiyas took the control of the SR Steel for granted. And they thought that SR Steel would continue to be in their control. And they tried to do every trick possible under their armory. And finally what happened, our SR Steel was taken away from the clutches of Ruiyas, and now it has become ArcelorMittal Nippon Steel. So the purpose behind Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, and please remember this, is also to change the mindset of the business owners to understand that the control of a business cannot be taken for granted. You can be in control of a business so long as you are running that business for value creation. The moment you stop creating value, that business will not remain in your control. That business will have to be given to somebody who can run that business profitably and create value out of that. Improve ease of doing business, remove hardships for all stakeholders of stressed companies. Because remember, it's not that every business fail because of the wrongdoings of its owners. Many times businesses do fail on account of genuine environmental conditions also. In such cases, of course, the owners cannot be termed to be a villain. In such cases, the owner has to be looked at sympathetically, and it has to be understood that failing in business, despite all your efforts, is definitely not a crime. And that is again the purpose of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. And finally, the objective of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, and friends, please remember, removal of the outdated and ineffective old insolvency laws. तो ऐसा नहीं है कि हिंदुस्तान में आईबीसी के आने से पहले इंसॉल्वेंसी और बैंकरप्सी को रिजॉल्व करने के लॉज नहीं थे, बहुत थे। इंसॉल्वेंसी के बहुत सारे लॉज थे, इंक्लूडिंग सिक्का, बट all those laws failed in achieving the purpose of insolvency resolution. The matter would go to SICA. The matter will go to the presidency insolvency, under the presidency insolvency, or under the different laws, and those matters will keep on prolonging for years altogether. In the process, the factory will stop, the machines will become scrap, and nobody was going to gain. In certain cases, some unscrupulous businessmen, having siphoned the money off from that company, would try and buy the same company through the back door. That would happen, but it was not really helping the economy. So friends, these are the purposes behind the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. Now let us understand what does the IBC contain. अब आप सब लोग जो हैं, you are wanting to appear for this insolvency exam, and you are aiming to pass this insolvency exam, and so obviously you will have to prepare. So in next few minutes, I am going to give some heads up about as to what does the IBC contain, And my purpose, my objective behind giving you this heads up is so as to make you aware of what is that you will have to prepare. एंड वाई डू आई डू दिस? आई डू दिस बिकॉज आपको एक बार मालूम पड़ जाए कि आपको किस जगह जाना है, तो आपका जो जो ट्रेवल है, आपकी जो जर्नी है, वो आसान हो जाती है. एंड दैट इज वॉट इज माई पर्पज एंड ऑब्जेक्टिव इन एनी केस behind delivering these sessions with you. So what does the IBC contain? Friends, remember the whole of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code of 2016 is divided in 5 parts, and the first part is about primary and preliminary, and which of course all of you know what would that contain. Then you have part 2, which is on insolvency resolution and liquidation for the corporate person. So please remember, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code is primarily divided on the insolvency resolution of corporates and insolvency resolution of non-corporates. So when I say insolvency resolution of corporates, what would it mean? It would mean that private limited companies, public limited companies, or the LLPs. Now these three entities will be covered under the corporate insolvency resolution, and partnership and individuals will be covered under the non-corporate insolvency resolution. So part 2 of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code covers the insolvency resolution of the corporates, and the part 3 of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy covers the individuals and partnerships. So insolvency resolution of individuals and partnerships. Then you have part 4, which is on regulation of insolvency professionals, agencies, information utilities. So please remember, the whole ecosystem of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code would comprise of a regulator, it would comprise of the insolvency professionals, it would comprise of IPAs, so insolvency professional agencies, and insolvency professional entities, and so that, and the information utilities, because information utilities also have a very significant role to play in the entire ecosystem of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. So the part 4 will deal as to how to regulate the insolvency professionals, how to regulate the insolvency professional agencies, how to regulate insolvency professional entities, and how to regulate insolvency information utilities. So that is your part number 4, and then of course part number 5 would comprise of miscellaneous provisions. So all put together there are 255 sections, but post is advent in 2016, some new sections have been added. So the exact number is not 255. So there are many sections added, like 12A, 29A, and many of them. So the actual number of sections that you have to prepare for the insolvency exam are going to be slightly more, only slightly more, not majorly more. So what are the different processes under the IBC कोड? तो अब जब आप एग्जाम की तैयारी करेंगे तो आपको क्या पढ़ना है, किस चीज़ के लिए आपको तैयारी करनी है, किस चीज़ को आपको समझना है. So I'm assuming that most of you who are attending this session are the aspirants for the insolvency professional. That means you want to qualify the exam and you want to become an insolvency professional. So पहला जो कॉर्पोरेट के लिए जो प्रोसेस है, दैट इज कॉर्पोरेट इंसॉल्वेंसी रेजोल्यूशन प्रोसेस. अब जरा इसको समझ के लीजिए, इसका मतलब क्या है. इसका मतलब ये है, गवर्नमेंट का इंटेंट क्या है. गवर्नमेंट का इंटेंट ये है कि अगर कोई कंपनी इंसॉल्वेंसी की तरफ बढ़ रही है, इफ अ कंपनी इज हेडिंग टुवर्ड्स इंसॉल्वेंसी, दैट मीन्स व्हाट, दैट मीन्स दिस कंपनी इज नॉट डूइंग वेल, and since it is not doing well, a time will come when this company will have to be closed. And if this company is closed, then thousands and crores of investment which is made in these kind of companies will become bad investment, and that bad investment will not contribute anything to the GDP, anything to the economy of the country, and therefore it is going to be a wasteful asset. So the first process is insolvency resolution process, corporate insolvency resolution process. मतलब क्या है? मतलब ये है कि जैसे ही मालूम पड़े कि एक कंपनी बंद होने के कगार पे है, तुरंत के तुरंत उस कंपनी को एनसीएलटी में लेके जाओ और उस कंपनी का जो इंसॉल्वेंसी रेजोल्यूशन इंसॉल्वेंसी का जो प्रोसेस चालू हो गया है, उस इंसॉल्वेंसी के प्रोसेस को रिवर्स करने के लिए, रिजॉल्व करने के लिए प्रोसेस चालू करो. तो ये कैसे मालूम पड़ेगा कि एक कंपनी इंसॉल्वेंसी की तरफ बढ़ रही है? सो देयर आर थ्री प्रोविजंस इन द इंसॉल्वेंसी एंड बैंक्रप्सी कोड. प्रोविजन नंबर 1 इज सेक्शन 7. सेक्शन 7 का मतलब क्या है? सेक्शन 7 का मतलब ये है कि अगर कोई फाइनेंशियल क्रेडिटर है, यानी कि लेंडर है, यानी कि जिसने कंपनी को पैसा उधार दिया हुआ है, अगर ऐसा कोई लेंडर है जिसने कंपनी को पैसा उधार दिया हुआ है और ये कंपनी उस पैसे को या उसके पैसे के ऊपर ब्याज को नहीं चुकाया है, तो ये जो फाइनेंशियल क्रेडिटर है, ही विल सिंपली गिव अ नोटिस टू द कंपनी that you have not paid so much of money due to me, kindly pay to immediately, else I will file application against you in the NCLT under section 7 of the IBC code. अब आप सोचेंगे कि सेक्शन 7 में अगर एप्लीकेशन फाइल कर दिया तो कौन सा तूफान आ जाएगा? तूफान आएगा. क्या तूफान आएगा? तूफान ये आएगा कि अगर एक कंपनी, जिसको कि आईबीसी की लैंग्वेज टर्मिनोलॉजी में कॉर्पोरेट डेटर बोलते हैं. सो इफ अ कॉर्पोरेट डेटर, और टू कीप इट सिंपल, इफ अ कंपनी हैज फेल्ड टू पे इंस्टॉलमेंट, ड्यू इंस्टॉलमेंट टू अ लेंडर, टू अ बैंकर, टू अ फाइनेंशियल इंस्टीट्यूशन, secured or unsecured doesn't really matter, then this lender will file an application under section 9, under section 7 of the IBC code with the NCLT. NCLT will go through the application, and if the NCLT comes to the conclusion that there is a merit and whatever has been stated in the application by the lender, by the banker, by the financial institution against the company is true, NCLT will admit that application, and the moment that application is admitted by the NCLT, immediately the board of directors of that company are suspended. That means they will not have any right, they will not have any control, they will not have any say in the management of that company. Then you will ask me the question as to then who will run that company, who will manage that company? Then the management of that company will shift between the IRP and the COC. So who is IRP? IRP is a qualified insolvency resolution professional. That means somebody who has passed the exam of IBBI of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code and has taken the membership of one insolvency professional agency and also taken the member of IBBI. Someone who is member of an IPA, also a member of IBBI, has passed the exam. Now this person will be appointed by the NCLT as the IRP to handle the affairs of this company. And this gentleman, together with the COC, what is COC? COC is Committee of the Creditors. So that means all the financial creditors of the company, depending on their proportion of the total lending to that company, will have a voting right and they will form the COC. So the management from the chief executive officer and the board of directors will be taken away, and the management then will be handed over to the IRP and the COC. And what will be their prime job? Their prime job. So tomorrow when all of you who are aspiring to be an insolvency professional, so tomorrow when you are appointed as the insolvency resolution professional by the NCLT, what is going to be your job? What is going to be your responsibility? Your job, your responsibility, number one is going to run that company as a going concern. That means what? That means आपको वो सब कुछ करना है जिसकी वजह से कंपनी किसी तरह से चलती रहे और बंद ना हो. वो आपकी पहली रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी. Second responsibility, of course, you have the COC, the committee of creditors who support you on this. So the second responsibility, you not only have to run that company on a going concern basis, but you also have to ensure that there is a proper resolution plan submitted by someone who is authentic and genuine, and who gives a resolution plan which is concrete, which is workable. And you as the insolvency professional will have to facilitate the process of insolvency resolution of this company. And now remember, this process, because the seriousness of the government was reflected from the fact कि जब वो आईबीसी आया तो उस समय उसमें टाइम फ्रेम था कि इंसॉल्वेंसी रेजोल्यूशन विल हैव टू बी डन within a period of 180 days, or the IRP could go for an extension of 90 days. So maximum it should have taken to 70 days. Subsequently, the duration has been increased based on the experience of the live cases. So that is process number one. That is corporate insolvency resolution is the process number one. Process number two, liquidation. Meaning what? Meaning अब ये जो सीरियसनेस है वो गवर्नमेंट की इस लॉ में रिफ्लेक्ट होती है. तो व्हाट द लॉ सेज दैट इन केस फॉर सम रीजन if insolvency of a corporate debtor is not resolved within the given time, then this corporate debtor has to go for compulsory liquidation. Why compulsory liquidation? Please understand the spirit. Why compulsory liquidation? Please understand the spirit. What is the spirit? The spirit is, if the company is turned around, if the insolvency is resolved, the company is profitable, operational, it is contributing to the economy of the country with the production and the output. But if that is not happening, then don't keep that company in the dead state. Liquidate that company. Sale of all the assets the company has. Let somebody buy all those assets. Because when somebody buys all those assets, that somebody would be able to use those assets, and he would use, when he starts using those assets, obviously he would be producing something, and that would be contributing to the economy of the country, to the GDP of the country. So liquidation process. And within liquidation process, you also have, one is liquidation process followed by the failure of the CIRP. Second is the voluntary liquidation under section 59. So in case somebody wants to close the company, they can close the company also. Now coming back to the first point, so it is not only section 7 which is for the financial creditors. There is a section 9 also, which is for the operational creditors. Meaning what? Meaning there is someone who has been supplying goods or services to the company, and this someone, despite supplying the goods and services of the company, has not been paid by the company the dues. Then what this operational creditor can do? This operational creditor first can give a notice to the company under section 8 of the IBC, and after giving the notice under section 8 of the IBC, if he does not get his money, if he does not get the confirmation from the company about the release of the payment, then what this operational creditor can do, he can do the same thing that the financial creditor did under section 7, operational creditor would do under section 9, and rest of the things would remain the same as was with the case of financial creditor. So in both the cases, if the applications are admitted by the NCLT, then the board of directors are suspended, and the NCLT will take the step to appoint the IRP, and the IRP will take the step to form the COC. And there is section 10, and section 10 of the IBC is about the corporate debtor himself filing an application for his insolvency resolution. That means a company है, उसके ऑपरेशनल क्रेडिटर ने एप्लीकेशन फाइल नहीं किया, फाइनेंशियल क्रेडिटर ने एप्लीकेशन फाइल नहीं किया, तो और कॉर्पोरेट जो डेटर है उसको मालूम पड़ रहा है कि उसकी सिचुएशन फाइनेंशियल इतनी ख़राब हो चुकी है कि उसकी कंपनी बंद होने वाली है, तो कॉर्पोरेट डेटर हिमसेल्फ, द कंपनी इटसेल्फ कैन फाइल एन एप्लीकेशन विद द NCLT suggesting that this company की insolvency needs to be resolved. Then you have fast track corporate insolvency resolution process. Fast track का simple सा मतलब ये है कि depending on certain threshold, some companies did not have to have longer time devoted to the CIRP. अगर उनकी छोटी कंपनी है, उनका छोटा threshold है in terms of net worth or turnover or profit, then such companies could go for through the fast track mode. So fast track में original जो thought process था वो था that these companies will need to be completed the insolvency process within 90 days. They could have a maximum extension of 45 days. So maximum 135 days this company would, a company which has gone through the process of fast track would need to be resolved, and that is not done, then this company will have to go for compulsory liquidation. Then you have non-corporate corporates, that is for individual and partnership. Incidentally, as of now, this part of the law is still not notified. That means, as it stands today, IBC can be IBC can be applied only with respect to a private limited company, public limited company, or an LLP. Today, it cannot be used against the individuals and the partnership firms. So that is what is the status as it stands today. Now, what is the ecosystem of the IBC? The ecosystem of the IBC comprises of number one regulator, which is IBBI. Uh, then you have NCLT and DRT. So NCLT and DRT are the adjudicating authority. NCLT is going to be for the corporates. DRT is going to be for the non-corporates. So the cases pertaining to the partnership firms and the individuals will go to DRT, and the cases pertaining to the corporates will go to NCLT. So besides NCLT and DRT, you also have the appellate authorities, and that is NCLT and DRT. These are the appellate authorities. So it's adjudicating authorities, then you got appellate authorities. High courts, as per the original thought process, original scheme of the things of the IBC, were not to have any jurisdiction. Only jurisdiction was available to the Supreme Court, and that too only in case of a question of law. But this is how it happens in our country. For on some provision which is available in the constitution, the High Court said that we still have the writ jurisdiction even in case of the IBC, and that is how many of the matters are still referred to the High Courts. So then you got a Supreme Court, you got insolvency professional agencies. So those of you who are aspiring, so you have the IPA, so the Institute of Chartered Accountants, Cost Accountants, and the Company Secretaries. Three of them have formed their IPAs, that is insolvency professional agencies. And please remember, anyone and everyone who has passed the exam will have to become member of one IPA. And remember, you are a company secretary. It is not necessary that you have to become member of IPA of the Institute of Company Secretaries. You are a chartered accountant. You do not have to become member necessarily of the IPA of chartered accountant. That freedom is available to you. Despite being a member of a particular profession, you can always select any of the IPAs from the three IPAs that are available. But that is part of the ecosystem that we have for insolvency and bankruptcy code. Then you have insolvency professional entities. So remember, you can practice as an individual or you can also practice as a firm. So in case if you are practicing as a firm, then it is referred as insolvency professional entities. And all these are regulated as part 4 of the IBC code that we discussed a little while ago. And then there are information utilities. So please remember, what are the information utilities? Information utilities are the organizations who will capture the credit information or the debt information or borrowing information of different lenders and the different borrowers on their portal. And so they have a very important role to play, information utilities. And anyone who wants to find out the borrowings of a particular borrower, then he has to access the information utilities, and through them he can find out the borrowings of a particular entity. So this is the broad ecosystem of IBC. Then there are certain regulations, and please remember, friends, one thing that I would like to compliment here at this point in time to IBBI, which is the main regulator of under the IBC, has done a phenomenal job. Phenomenal meaning absolutely phenomenal job. Number one, you would notice that the language of the IBC code is very, very simple, and so is the language of all the regulations and the rules that have been brought out by the IBBI from time to time. Even those languages are also very unlike legal, so which means you find it very easy to comprehend. So there are many regulations that have been brought out by the IBBI from time to time. Please remember, as aspirant of the insolvency and bankruptcy profession, you will not only have to prepare yourself on the IBC Code 2016, you will also need to prepare yourself on these regulations and the rules which have been brought out by the IBBI from time to time. And please remember, these regulations are nothing but the reflections of the provisions which are incorporated under the IBC Code. So you have regulation on the CIRP, you have regulation on liquidation process, you have regulation on voluntary liquidation process, and you understand regulations are primarily to facilitate the implementation of a particular provision of the law. So you have regulations on the insolvency professionals, regulation on information utilities, then personal guarantee and the to corporate debtor, and insolvency personal guarantors to the corporate debtor. Then you got a fast track CIRP. So these and some more regulations are available. As the aspirants for the insolvency and bankruptcy profession, please remember, you will have to prepare yourself on these regulations also. Your understanding of these regulations will help you tomorrow when you become a member and start practicing as an insolvency professional. Then there are certain rules also that you will need to prepare yourself. So there are insolvency and liquidation of financial service providers rules. So all these rules are available and you will have to prepare yourself about these rules as well. How to, now we shift our focus to how to prepare, write and qualify the limited insolvency exam. तो कैसे करेंगे? अब जो हमारा जो फोकस है, अब हम जो डिस्कस करेंगे वो ये है कि भाई एग्ज़ाम सेंट्रिक. सो अभी तक हमने देखा फ्रॉम द पर्सपेक्टिव ऑफ कि क्यों हिंदुस्तान की इकोनॉमी की कंडीशन में ऐसा क्या प्रॉब्लम खड़ा हुआ जिसकी वजह से हिंदुस्तान की आर्थिक परिस्थिति में चैलेंज आए, और वो चैलेंजेस को सुधारने के लिए ऐसा क्या करने की ज़रूरत है जिससे कि वो चैलेंजेस जो फेस किए इंडिया की इकोनॉमी ने, वो चैलेंजेस द्वारा से ना फेस करने पड़े, और वो जो रिफॉर्म्स आए हैं उनमें प्रोफेशनल्स का क्या रोल है, ये अब तक हमने डिस्कस किया. अब हमको ये डिस्कस करना है कि इंसॉल्वेंसी प्रोफेशनल बनने के लिए आपको जो एग्ज़ाम पास करना है, वो एग्ज़ाम पास करने के लिए आपकी क्या अप्रोच होनी चाहिए. क्यों? क्योंकि इंसॉल्वेंसी का जो एग्ज़ाम है IBBI का, उसका कोर्स करिकुलम इतना वास्ट है कि आई कैन टेल यू, एज आई वाज टेलिंग यू yesterday, it is so vast. It is much more than the course curriculum of the courses of cost accountancy, company secretary and chartered accountancy. उससे भी ज़्यादा कोर्स करिकुलम है. और सबसे ज़्यादा इंटरेस्टिंग बात यह है कि वो सारा की सारा कोर्स करिकुलम पर आपकी टेस्टिंग होती है सिर्फ 2 घंटे में. यानी कि पूरी तैयारी करके आपको 2 घंटे का समय मिलता है, और उस 2 घंटे में आपको बताना पड़ता है कि आप किस तरह से वो सारे कोर्स करिकुलम के ऊपर से तैयार हैं. एंड दैट इज़ वाई यू शुड बी अलाउड टू प्रैक्टिस एज एन इंसॉल्वेंसी प्रोफेशनल. तो सीधी सी बात है, कोर्स बहुत ज़्यादा है, टाइम हमारे पास बहुत कम है. अगर टाइम हमारे पास बहुत कम है तो हमको क्या करना होगा? हमको एक सिस्टमेटिक अप्रोच लगानी होगी, सिस्टमेटिक स्ट्रेटजी लगानी होगी तैयारी करने के लिए, सो दैट वी आर एबल टू प्रिपेयर अवर सेल्व्स वेरी वेल एंड सो दैट वी आर एबल टू पास दैट एग्जाम विदाउट मच डिफिकल्टी. सो क्या करना है? लेट अस लुक एट स्ट्रेटजी नंबर 1. स्ट्रेटजी नंबर 1, प्लीज अंडरस्टैंड कि इंसॉल्वेंसी का जो एग्जाम है और वैल्यूएशन का जो एग्ज़ाम है उसमें क्या फ़र्क है? उसमें पहला फ़र्क ये है कि वैल्यूएशन का जो एग्ज़ाम है वो न्यूमेरिकल्स डोमिनेटेड है. यानी कि उसमें आपको बहुत जगह पर कैलकुलेशन करने की ज़रूरत पड़ती है और कैलकुलेशंस के द्वारा आपको आंसर्स फाइंड करने होते हैं. इन केस ऑफ इंसॉल्वेंसी एंड बैंक्रप्सी एग्ज़ाम, there is very little of numbers, only to the extent of finance, only to the extent of 3-4 marks. Rest of all is all theory. That means you have to do a lot of reading. That is difference number 1. Difference number 2, let me also tell you friends, valuation exam in my experience and in the experience of so many of them is much more tougher than the exam of इंसॉल्वेंसी. इंसॉल्वेंसी का एग्ज़ाम भी टफ है. मैं बिल्कुल ये नहीं कह रहा हूँ कि इंसॉल्वेंसी के एग्ज़ाम को आप आसानी से ले सकते हैं, बिल्कुल नहीं. इंसॉल्वेंसी का एग्ज़ाम टफ है, लेकिन वैल्यूएशन का जो एग्ज़ाम है वो उससे भी ज़्यादा टफ है. और उससे भी ज़्यादा टफ क्यों है? क्योंकि उसमें आपको बहुत सारे न्यूमेरिकल्स ऐसे टॉपिक्स हैं जो आपको जिसके ऊपर आपको तैयारी करनी है, क्योंकि वो टॉपिक्स को अब तक आपने बहुत ही कर्सरी निगाह से देखा होगा, लेकिन वैल्यूएशन के लिए आपको उनको इन डेप्थ तरीके से अंडरस्टैंड करना होगा. बाकी एवरीथिंग एल्स regarding the evaluation exam and the insolvency exam are completely same. What is the structure? Remember, structure is same for the insolvency exam as it was the case for the evaluation exam that we discussed yesterday. So the exam is interesting and challenging because 2 घंटे का समय है, 120 मिनट का समय है और आपके पास में 100 क्वेश्चंस का आपको आंसर करना है. और याद रखिए, आपको 1 सेकेंड ज़्यादा मिलता नहीं है. So that is number 1. Number 2, it's not a pen and pencil exam. It is a online multi MCQ based exam. So you will have 4 choices given to you. You will have to pick up one choice out of that and give the answer. You need only 60 marks to pass the exam. पूरा एग्जाम 100 मार्क्स का है, लेकिन आपको 60 मार्क्स चाहिए एग्जाम को पास करने के लिए. जैसा कि मैंने yesterday कहा, देयर इज अ नेगेटिव मार्किंग. आपने 1 मार्क का क्वेश्चन गलत किया तो आपके 0.25 मार्क्स कट जाएंगे. आपने 2 मार्क का एक क्वेश्चन था उसको गलत किया, आपके 0.5 मार्क्स कट जाएंगे ऑटोमेटिकली विदाउट यू नोइंग अबाउट इट. सो इट नीड्स ट्रेमेंडस अमाउंट ऑफ फोकस्ड अटेंशन एंड प्रिपरेशन. कैसे करेंगे तैयारी? तो देखिए दोस्तों, मैंने क्या किया कि बेस्ड ऑन माई एक्सपीरियंस ऑफ पासिंग बोथ दीज एग्जाम्स, मैंने आइडेंटिफाई किया कि क्या मुझे ये पूरा जो सिलेबस है पूरा की पूरा मुझे तैयार करने की ज़रूरत है. क्या पूरे सिलेबस के ऊपर मुझे बराबर समय देने की ज़रूरत है. तो जब मैंने वो एग्ज़ाम पास किए दोनों, तो मैंने ये एग्ज़ाम को अच्छी तरह से स्टडी किया और मैंने मेरे दिमाग में ध्यान में लेके आया कि कुछ टॉपिक्स ऐसे हैं जिसमें कि आपको तैयारी एकदम ज़बरदस्त करनी पड़ेगी. दैट मीन्स यू विल हैव टू रियली प्रिपेयर एक्सट्रीमली वेल एज फार एज दोज टॉपिक्स आर कंसर्न. तो मैंने क्या किया, वो टॉपिक्स को मैंने आइडेंटिफाई किया है, मैं आपके साथ में अभी डिस्कस करूंगा. वो टॉपिक्स को मैंने आइडेंटिफाई किया और उनको मैंने मार्क किया एज प्रोफेशनल. क्या मतलब है कहने का मतलब यह है कि जिस टॉपिक को मैंने प्रोफेशनल करके मार्क किया है, इसका मतलब ये है कि ये टॉपिक की आपकी तैयारी एकदम ज़बरदस्त होनी चाहिए, प्रोफेशनल लेवल की होनी चाहिए. फिर मैंने कुछ टॉपिक को हाई करके मार्क किया है, और हाई करने का मार्क का मतलब क्या है कि ये टॉपिक्स इंपॉर्टेंट हैं, लेकिन इन टॉपिक्स के बारे में आपको पहले से कुछ आइडिया होगा, इसलिए आपको उतना ज़्यादा समय देने की ज़रूरत नहीं है जितना कि आपको प्रोफेशनल जिनको मार्क किया है उन टॉपिक्स को देने की ज़रूरत है. फिर कुछ टॉपिक्स को मैंने नॉर्मल करके मार्क किया है. इसका मतलब ये कि ये जो टॉपिक है जिसको मैंने नॉर्मल मार्क किया है, ये रिलेटिवली इजी हैं. आपको थोड़ा सा रिफ़्रेश करने की ज़रूरत है, अपनी याददाश्त को थोड़ा सा ताज़ा करने की ज़रूरत है, और दैट शुड हेल्प यू. एंड कुछ टॉपिक्स को मैंने चेक इनपुट आउटपुट रेशियो ये करके मार्क किया है. इसका मतलब क्या है? इसका मतलब ये फ्रेंड्स कि जब मैंने इन एग्ज़ाम्स की तैयारी करी तो मैंने देखा कि कुछ टॉपिक्स ऐसे थे उनका कवरेज तो बहुत वास्ट था. यानी कि इतनी मोटी मोटी बुक्स हैं जो पढ़ती थी उन सब्जेक्ट्स की, उन टॉपिक्स की तैयारी करने के लिए, लेकिन वहाँ से जो मार्क्स का जो वेटेज था वो बहुत कम था. तो फिर मुझे लगा कि ऐसे टॉपिक्स के बारे में आप विचार कर सकते हैं कि आपको समय देना चाहिए कि नहीं देना चाहिए, और अगर देना चाहिए तो कितना देना चाहिए. क्यों? क्योंकि याद रखिए, समय हमारे पास में कम है और हमको 100 मार्क्स का क्वेश्चन पेपर अटेम्प्ट करना है, और हमको पास करने के लिए 100 मार्क्स नहीं चाहिए, 90 नहीं चाहिए, 80 नहीं चाहिए, 70 नहीं चाहिए, हमको पास करने के लिए 60 मार्क्स चाहिए. तो अगर मैं मेरी तैयारी इस तरह से करूं कि मैं 70-80-90 मार्क्स का जो कोर्स कंटेंट है उसको ज़बरदस्त तैयार कर लूं, और 10 मार्क्स का अगर मैं थोड़ा सा हल्का फुल्का करके छोड़ दूं जिसमें मेरी पहले से ही काफ़ी नॉलेज अच्छी है, तो मेरा काम बन सकता है. सो दिस इज़ व्हाट आई हैव डन टू हेल्प यू. अब व्हाट शुड बी योर अप्रोच? अब देखिए, जैसा कि मैंने पहले कहा थोड़ी देर पहले कि जो वैल्यूएशन का एग्ज़ाम है वो न्यूमेरिकल बेस्ड है, इंसॉल्वेंसी का जो एग्ज़ाम है वो थ्योरेटिकल बेस्ड है. यानी कि इसका मतलब क्या है, इसमें आपको रीडिंग बहुत करनी है, बहुत, यानी कि सब कुछ रीडिंग ही करनी है. इंसॉल्वेंसी कोड आपको पूरा रीड करना है, और जो भी रेगुलेशंस हैं वो आपको पूरे रीड करने हैं, रूल्स हैं वो भी आपको पूरे रीड करने हैं, और जो भी जनरल लॉज हैं वो भी आपको सारे रीड ही करने हैं. तो इसमें रीडिंग ज़्यादा है इसमें. तो क्या करिए, जैसा कि मैंने कल कहा था, जब पहली बार पढ़ेंगे ना इंसॉल्वेंसी कोड को या रेगुलेशंस को, तो बस पढ़ते रहिए, चिंता मत करिए कि समझ में आ रहा है कि नहीं आ रहा है, पढ़ते रहिए। और मैं आपको बताऊं कि जब आप पढ़ रहे हो ना, आपको शायद मालूम ना पड़े कि आपको समझ रहा है कि नहीं समझ रहा है, लेकिन फैक्ट ये है कि आपका माइंड उस चीज़ को बराबर कैप्चर कर रहा है। और ये आपको कब समझेगा, ये आपको सेकंड टाइम जब आप रीड करोगे तो आपको समझेगा। ध्यान में करिए, तो मैं पढ़ चुका हूँ। अगर आपको मन में ये ख्याल आ रहा है कि अरे ये तो मैं पढ़ चुका हूँ, इसका मतलब क्या है? इसका मतलब है कि आपके दिमाग को, आपके ब्रेन को ये चीज़ याद है कि आप इसको पढ़ चुके हो। और अगर आपके ब्रेन को याद है आप इसको पढ़ चुके हो, इसका मतलब क्या है कि आप इसको समझ भी चुके हो। सो पहली बार जब करिए प्लेन रीडिंग करिए और एकदम बिना चिंता के करिए कि याद हो रहा है कि नहीं याद हो रहा है। दूसरी बार जब आप रीड करेंगे तो हाईलाइट करिए, तो यानी कि हाईलाइटर पेन जो आता है ना वो साथ में रखिए। जो जो पॉइंट आपको इम्पोर्टेंट लगे उनको मार्क करते रहिए। और जब आप तीसरी बार रीडिंग करेंगे तो क्या करिए, नोट्स बनाना शुरू करिए। पहली बार में नोट्स मत बनाइए, दूसरी बार में नोट्स मत बनाइए, तीसरी बार जब पढ़ना शुरू करेंगे तब आप नोट्स बनाना शुरू करिए। क्यों? क्योंकि पहली बार में पढ़ के नोट बनाएंगे तो आप देखेंगे पूरी बुक कॉपी हो जाएगी, लेकिन जब आप थर्ड टाइम पढ़ते समय नोट बनाएंगे तो फिर आप देखेंगे जो क्रक्स होगा वही आपको खाली नोट करना पड़ेगा। फोर्थ टाइम जब आपको रीडिंग करनी है तो याद रखिए आपको बुक भी पढ़ने की जरूरत नहीं है, आपको रेगुलेशन भी पढ़ने की जरूरत नहीं है। आप जब नोट्स पढ़ेंगे उतने से ही आपको बराबर याद आ जाएगा कि वो पर्टिकुलर सेक्शन का या सब सेक्शन का इंटेंट क्या है, उसका प्रोविजन क्या है। और जब आप फिफ्थ टाइम पढ़ेंगे तो आपको पढ़ने की भी जरूरत नहीं पड़ेगी। जब आप नोट्स को देखेंगे तो लाइन को देखते ही आपको इमीडिएटली आपके दिमाग में आंसर क्लिक होगा, दिस इज द आंसर, दिस इज व्हाट दिस टॉपिक इज ऑल अबाउट। और आपको क्या करना है, आपको अपनी तैयारी को इतना मजबूत करना है कि आप इस पॉइंट पर पहुंच जाएं कि जैसे ही आप उसको नोट्स को देखें आपको तुरंत ध्यान में आ जाए कि क्या टॉपिक है, राइट। सो और साथ साथ में क्या करिए, व्हेन यू आर प्रिपेयरिंग, व्हेन यू आर डूइंग द रीडिंग, many times it would happen that you are reading something and suddenly something comes to your mind, oh this is something on which there can be a question. So if you get a thought like this, just write that question down in a notebook that you must keep together with you. उसमें आप लिख लीजिए कि ये क्वेश्चन हो सकता है और उसका आंसर क्या है वो भी लिख लीजिए। और ये क्वेश्चन आप देखिए, ये जो क्वेश्चन लिखेंगे ना, आपको बड़ा ताजुब होगा कि जब आप पेपर देने जाएंगे तो हो सकता है कि काफ़ी सारे क्वेश्चन आपको यहाँ से ही मिल जाएं और जिनके आंसर के बारे में आप 100% रूप से कॉन्फिडेंट रहेंगे। Let us now look at the entire syllabus topic wise. Now please remember the discussion that we are having is having with regard to the course curriculum which is still in force. तो ये जो हम डिस्कशन कर रहे हैं वो डिस्कशन इज बेस्ड ऑन द सिलेबस दैट बिकेम इफेक्टिव ऑन 1 जनवरी 21 and it would remain effective till 28th February 22. 1 मार्च से कोर्स करिकुलम चेंज हो जाएगा, यानी कि कुछ चीज़ें हैं वो चेंज हो जाएंगी, तो आपको थोड़ी सी एडिशनल मेहनत करनी पड़ेगी और वो आपको देखना पड़ेगा कि हम जो डिस्कस कर रहे हैं उसके अलावा क्या क्या चेंजेस अगले सिलेबस में हो गए हैं, उतना आपको अपनी तरफ से ऐड करना पड़ेगा। एंड आई एम श्योर अगर आप वो करेंगे तो आपका उसकी वजह से आपको बहुत ज़्यादा फायदा होगा। सो लेट्स स्टार्ट टॉपिक वाइज। नंबर 1, so the first topic as part of the course curriculum is the IBC Code and rules and regulations thereunder. So that is the first one. उसका वेटेज कितना है? 25 मार्क्स का है। तो क्या करेंगे, कैसे तैयारी करेंगे? अब देखिए क्या करिए, एक है ना इंसॉल्वेंसी एंड बैंक्रप्सी कोड का बेयर एक्ट, लेटेस्ट बेयर एक्ट, ताकि सारी सेक्शंस उसमें आ गई हों, वो आप लीजिए, उसके थ्रू पढ़ना शुरू करिए। और ऐसी बुक लीजिए जिसमें के सारे रेगुलेशंस हों। सो फर्स्ट स्टार्ट विद द प्लेन रीडिंग ऑफ द इंसॉल्वेंसी एंड बैंक्रप्सी कोड एंड प्लेन रीडिंग ऑफ द रूल्स एंड रेगुलेशंस अंडर द IBC कोड 2016। सो ये आपको याद रखना है। और याद रखिए कि अगर आप ये एग्ज़ाम 28 फरवरी के बाद में लिखते हैं, अगर ये एग्ज़ाम 28 फरवरी के बाद में लिखते हैं तो 28 फरवरी 22 तक के जितने भी अमेंडमेंट्स हो चुके हैं दोज ऑल्सो विल बी पार्ट ऑफ योर कोर्स करिकुलम। सो दैट मीन्स यू विल हैव टू रियली मेक श्योर दैट यू टेक इनटू अकाउंट ऑल द अमेंडमेंट्स विच आर डन अप टू 28th of February 2022। लेकिन अगर आप ये एग्ज़ाम इस महीने में लिख रहे हैं, यानी कि बचे कुछ जो दिन हैं इस महीने के उसमें लिख रहे हैं, तो फिर आपको 29 फरवरी 21 तक के जो भी अमेंडमेंट्स हैं आपको सिर्फ उनको तैयार करना पड़ेगा। दिस इज द कोर्स करिकुलम का स्ट्रक्चर है। राइट अब आप देखेंगे कि मैंने इसको प्रोफेशनल मार्क किया है, राइट इसका मतलब क्या है, इसका मतलब ये क्रक्स है, ये आईबीसी के एग्जाम का क्रक्स है, आपकी इसकी तैयारी एकदम मजबूत होनी ही चाहिए. Then come to the Companies Act, Partnership Act, and the LLP. Now, under the Companies Act, you can see that there's a chapter 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 15, 17, 18, 20, 27, 28, and 29. So only these chapters are part of the course curriculum of the IBC exam, and therefore prepare only with regard to these chapters only. So remaining part of the Companies Act you do not have to worry about. But since all of us are company secretaries or chartered accountants or cost accountants, and therefore our understanding generally of the Companies Act is fairly good, and therefore I have marked this topic as high, not professional, as high, because मुझे मालूम है ये टॉपिक में आपकी अंडरस्टैंडिंग पहले से ही काफ़ी कुछ अच्छी है. You will also have to prepare on the Partnership Act and also on the LLP Act 2008. अब देखिए ये जो 3 नंबर का टॉपिक है विच इज़ कंपनीज एक्ट, पार्टनरशिप एक्ट एंड पार्टनरशिप एक्ट एंड LLP, उसका जो वेटेज है 100 में से वो कितना है, 4 मार्क्स का, यानी कि इसमें से 4 मार्क्स के क्वेश्चन आपके सामने आएंगे. देन यू हैव जनरल लॉज. नाउ जनरल लॉज में आपको क्या करना है, जनरल लॉज का जो कोर्स करिकुलम है वो बहुत वास्ट है. कॉन्ट्रैक्ट एक्ट है, निगोशिएबल इंस्ट्रूमेंट एक्ट है, ट्रांसफर ऑफ प्रॉपर्टी एक्ट है, कोड ऑफ सिविल प्रोसीजर है, प्रिवेंशन ऑफ करप्शन एक्ट है, PMLA है, आर्बिट्रेशन एंड कॉन्सिलिएशन एक्ट है, MSMED एक्ट है, रियल एस्टेट रेगुलेशन डेवलपमेंट एक्ट है, SCRA है. So these are the subjects as part of the general laws. और ये यहाँ ख़त्म नहीं होता है, इसके अलावा सारफेसी एक्ट है, RDD-BFI एक्ट है और फिर सेबी के रेगुलेशन है. तो यहाँ पर मैं आपको बताना चाहूँगा कि ये जो आप 10 जो स्टैच्यूट हैं जिसके बारे में मैंने आपको बताया, इंडियन कॉन्ट्रैक्ट एक्ट, नेगोशिएबल इंस्ट्रूमेंट एक्ट एंड MSMED एक्ट एंड सिक्योरिटीज़ एंड कॉन्ट्रैक्ट रेगुलेशन एक्ट, इनको आपको कितना टाइम देना है, नॉर्मल टाइम देना है. लेकिन सारफेसी एक्ट और RDD-BFI एक्ट, इनको आपकी तैयारी इन जो 2 एक्ट हैं इनकी तैयारी आपकी प्रोफेशनल लेवल की होनी चाहिए. दैट मीन्स अगर आपको कोई सोते समय भी जगह के कोई सवाल पूछे इन एक्ट्स के बारे में, यू शुड बी एबल टू आंसर. नाउ पॉइंट नंबर 14 इज और अबाउट सेबी रेगुलेशन. सो ICDS है, डीलिस्टिंग है, सेस्ट है, LODR है. अब देखिए आपने देखा होगा, आप में से आई एम श्योर ऑल ऑफ यू वुड हैव गॉन थ्रू दीज रेगुलेशन वन टाइम और दी अदर, और आपको ध्यान में आएगा कि ये काफ़ी बल्कि हैं. और अगर ये काफ़ी बल्कि हैं तो आप सोच सकते हैं कि ये पूरे जनरल लॉज जो है उसमें से 11 मार्क्स के क्वेश्चन आएंगे. उसमें से जितना भी है आप देखिए कि सेबी पे 11 में से कितने क्वेश्चन आएंगे, 4 रेगुलेशन, उसमें हो सकता है 1 मार्क का क्वेश्चन आए. तो यू कैन टेक अ कॉल कि आपको कितना उसके ऊपर टाइम देना चाहिए. बिकॉज रिमेंबर, टाइम मैनेजमेंट इज समथिंग दैट यू रियली हैव टू डू फॉर दिस एग्जाम. तो वो कॉल आपको लेना है कि ICDS को मैं कितना पढ़ूँ, कितना टाइम दूँ, या डीलिस्टिंग ऑफ इक्विटी शेयर्स का जो रेगुलेशन है सेबी का उसको मैं कितना टाइम दूँ, या सेस्ट है उसको कितना टाइम दूँ. दैट इज़ व्हाट यू विल हैव टू टेक अ कॉल. बट माई सजेशन इज प्लीज रिमेंबर चेक इनपुट आउटपुट रेशियो so that you are able to manage your time well. देन फाइनेंस एंड अकाउंट्स के टॉपिक्स हैं. फाइनेंस एंड अकाउंट्स में कॉर्पोरेट फाइनेंस है, फाइनेंशियल एनालिसिस है, लिक्विडिटी मैनेजमेंट है, टैक्स प्लानिंग एंड GST है. नाउ फॉर दीज टॉपिक्स फ्रेंड्स, आई एम श्योर यू डू नॉट हैव टू डू एनी स्पेसिफिक प्रिपरेशन. कॉर्पोरेट फाइनेंस है, फाइनेंशियल एनालिसिस है, लिक्विडिटी मैनेजमेंट है, तो ये टॉपिक्स ऐसे हैं जिनके बारे में जनरली हम लोगों की अंडरस्टैंडिंग काफ़ी अच्छी होती है. तो इसलिए हमें बहुत ज़्यादा समय देने की ज़रूरत नहीं है, थोड़ी बहुत तैयारी कर सकते हैं. लेकिन कुछ चीज़ें हैं जो मैं आपको सजेस्ट करूंगा इसमें, जैसे फाइनेंशियल रेशोज़ हैं, ROI क्या है, ROE क्या है, ROCE क्या है, EVA क्या है, कॉस्ट ऑफ कैपिटल क्या है, इनकी आप अंडरस्टैंडिंग जरूर मजबूत करिए. CAPM मॉडल क्या है, तो CAPM मॉडल, कैपिटल एसेट प्राइसिंग मॉडल, रिमेंबर, इज़ अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टूल in helping the businesses determine the cost of capital. And as I was telling you yesterday, cost of capital is something which is so critical for any decision that you take in finance. So strengthen your understanding about CAPM as to how to figure out, how to work out CAPM. And remember, when I speak CAPM, it may sound little complex and difficult. कि बाप रे ये तो मॉडल है, कितना डिफिकल्ट होगा, लेकिन मैं आपको बताऊं कि ये मॉडल बहुत सिंपल है, कुछ भी मुश्किल इसमें नहीं है। ऑपरेटिंग लेवरेज क्या है उसको समझ के लीजिए, फाइनेंशियल लेवरेज क्या है उसको समझ के लीजिए, और इंडेसेस की ब्रॉड अंडरस्टैंडिंग करके लीजिए। सो अभी इंडेसेस तो ऑल पुट टुगेदर देर आर 29 indices. There are 29 indices, right? 29 इंडेसेस हैं, तो जो भी जितने भी इंडेसेस हैं 29 39 वॉट एवर द नंबर भी, वो सारे इंडेसेस में आपको सिर्फ इतना करिए कि आप सारे 39 इंडेसेस हैं, ऑल पुट टुगेदर दे आर 39 इंडियन अकाउंटिंग स्टैंडर्ड्स। सो कम से कम इतना तो मालूम करिए कि वो लिस्ट इंडेसेस की क्या है ना, और इंडेस का नंबर क्या है, और वो इंडेस में क्या कवर होता है। अगर आप इतना भी टाइम डिवोट करेंगे उसके ऊपर, आई थिंक यू विल बी एबल टू answer the questions on indices. But at the same time, friends, let me tell you, as the legal professional, accounts professional, finance professional, index is something which is the language of accounting, language of future, and therefore otherwise also we need to strengthen our understanding about indices in any case. So this is what you can prepare. तो finance and accounts के ऊपर जो weightage है वो 5 मार्क्स का है। उसके बाद में जनरल अवेयरनेस है। अब जनरल अवेयरनेस तो आप समझ सकते हैं, जैसे जनरल अवेयरनेस है तो सीधी सी बात है, इसका तो कोई कोर्स करिकुलम हो ही नहीं सकता। जनरल अवेयरनेस है यानी कहीं से भी कोई भी क्वेश्चन आ सकता है। नाउ फॉर एग्जांपल, आई वुड रिमेंबर व्हेन आई अपीयर्ड फॉर दिस एग्जाम, there was a question that the government has recently amended the number of days of leave for the maternity from this to this. Now that was the question which was there when I wrote the exam, and I did not know the answer, so I did not answer that question because I would never like to take chance, but I failed in that attempt. Next time when I appeared, again this question was there. Incidentally, again I did not know the answer. Again I left that question as it is, but this time I passed the exam. So उसके बारे में पूरी अंडरस्टैंडिंग आप करिए। कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के बारे में पूछ सकते हैं, यूनियन जुडिशरी के बारे में पूछ सकते हैं, हाई कोर्ट्स इन दी स्टेट्स हैं उसके बारे में पूछ सकते हैं, राइट्स ऑफ वर्कमैन के बारे में पूछ सकते हैं, इकोनॉमी के ऊपर कुछ क्वेश्चंस हो सकते हैं, फाइनेंशियल मार्केट्स के बारे में क्वेश्चंस हो सकते हैं, फॉरेंसिक ऑडिट के बारे में क्वेश्चन हो सकते हैं, और बेसिक कंसेप्ट्स ऑफ वैल्यूएशन के बारे में भी कुछ क्वेश्चंस हो सकते हैं। जैसे कल हमने डिस्कस किया कि विच आर दी अप्रोचेज फॉर वैल्यूएशन, इनकम अप्रोच, मार्केट अप्रोच, and the cost approach, which are the method that we discussed. So there can be a question on basics of the valuation. Then topic 7 is about important decisions of Supreme Court, High Court and NCLT और NCLT, उसके बारे में डिस्कशन हो सकता है, केस लॉज के बारे में, और all put together 60 case laws are there, and these 60 case laws are available on the website of IBBI. This number may perhaps must have increased. तो ये जो केस लॉज हैं इसका जो वेटेज है 10 है, यानी कि आपको करीब 60 70 80 केसेस को स्टडी करना होगा, लेकिन वो 60 70 80 केसेस की स्टडी के बेसिस पे आप 10 मार्क्स के क्वेश्चन को अटेम्प्ट कर पाएंगे। पर याद रखिए, केस लॉज आप कब पढ़ना शुरू करिए? केस लॉज आप पढ़ना शुरू करिए तब जब आपने इंसॉल्वेंसी बैंक्रप्सी कोड को और रेगुलेशंस को अच्छी तरह से समझ लिया है। देन यू स्टार्ट प्रिपेयरिंग ऑन दी case laws, not before that, because if you start preparing before that, you will find that they are very very cumbersome, very very difficult. But once you have good understanding of IBC and the regulations, then case laws will become like a story. कैसी होना चाहिए आपकी तैयारी? प्रोफेशनल, एब्सोल्युटली प्रोफेशनल, और 10 मार्क्स का वेटेज है। उसके बाद में केस स्टडी ऑन कॉर्पोरेट इंसॉल्वेंसी रेजोल्यूशन एंड लिक्विडेशन। सो ये कॉर्पोरेट से रिलेटेड जो है उस पर केस स्टडी होगी, और उस पर करीब 10 मार्क्स के क्वेश्चन होंगे, और 2 मार्क का हर एक क्वेश्चन होगा, और उसका वेटेज आपको 20 मार्क्स का होगा। यानी कि कॉर्पोरेट से रिलेटेड केस स्टडीज़ होंगे, इंसॉल्वेंसी और लिक्विडेशन, और वो केस स्टडीज़ को आपको आंसर करना होगा। और फिर से एक बार समझ के लीजिए, वो केस स्टडीज़ को आप कब आंसर कर पाएंगे? वो केस स्टडीज़ को आप तभी आंसर कर पाएंगे जब आपकी अंडरस्टैंडिंग अबाउट द IBC एंड द रेगुलेशंस इज़ वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग, राइट, एंड द केस लॉ इज ऑल्सो वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग। फिर आप ये केस स्टडीज़ को बड़ी आसानी से रिजॉल्व कर पाएंगे। कैसी होनी चाहिए आपकी तैयारी? प्रोफेशनल। देन यू हैव ऑल्सो केस स्टडीज कमिंग फ्रॉम द non-corporate part, that is part 3 of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. And remember, as of now, the part 3 of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code is still not notified, yet you will get case studies pertaining to the matters pertaining to part 3 of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016 that relates to partnership and individuals. So cases, hypothetical cases would be given to you and you will need to give the answers. वेटेज कितना है? 8 मार्क्स का है. तो अगर ये आपकी यहाँ अंडरस्टैंडिंग अच्छी है तो आपको ये बड़ी आसानी से यह मार्क्स मिलेंगे. 6 मार्क्स का आपका वेटेज है. एंड फाइनली केस स्टडी ऑन बिजनेस एंड प्रोफेशनल एथिक्स. तो 3 मार्क्स की केस स्टडी होगी और 3 क्वेश्चंस होंगे और 2 मार्क्स का हर एक क्वेश्चन होगा. सो टोटल वेटेज उसका 6 मार्क्स का होगा. तो ये आपको करना है. नाउ फ्रेंड्स, let us come to the last part of our discussion today. Okay, now ये जो पोर्शन हम डिस्कस कर रहे हैं, now what are we discussing? We are discussing कि जब आप IBBI के एग्ज़ाम सेंटर में कंप्यूटर के सामने बैठे हैं और जब आपको 2 घंटे का समय है, वो 2 घंटे में आप किस तरह से अपने आप को मैनेज करेंगे, उस पर बहुत कुछ डिपेंड करेगी आपकी सक्सेस. आई कैन टेल यू फ्रेंड्स, ये एग्ज़ाम को पास करने के लिए 75% विल डिपेंड ऑन हाउ वेल यू आर प्रिपेयर्ड एंड 25% विल डिपेंड हाउ यू बिहेव और हाउ यू हैंडल योर सेल्फ वेन यू आर सिटिंग इन फ्रंट ऑफ द कंप्यूटर फॉर दोज 2 hours. एंड आई कैन टेल यू बेस्ड ऑन माई एक्सपीरियंस कि वो जो दो घंटे आप बैठे हो कंप्यूटर के सामने, दैट 25% is even more important than the 75% of your preparation. I'm not suggesting that you should not do your preparation well. Of course you have to do your preparation extremely well, but ये 2 घंटे हैं वो आपको बड़े तरीके से संभालने हैं. तो उसकी चर्चा करने से पहले थोड़ा सा और एक बता दूं मैं आपको कि ये जो भी एग्जाम्स, जो भी टॉपिक्स हैं, बेयर एक्ट को यूज़ करिए. नंबर 2, एक लिंक है जो आपके सामने है और ये लिंक है, दिस इज द लिंक ऑफ पोर्टल ऑफ IIPI ऑफ ICAI. तो उनका जो ICAI का जो IPA है, उनका एक पोर्टल है, लर्निंग पोर्टल है, और वो पोर्टल until recently was open to all. I suppose it is open to all now also. So that is what you can access for your preparation, because उस पर आपको बेयर एक्ट सारे मिल जाएंगे, डाउनलोड कर सकते हैं आप वहाँ से. पूरा इनफ मटेरियल मिल जाएगा तैयारी करने के लिए. MCQs मिलेंगे आपको और मॉक टेस्ट भी मिलेंगे वहाँ करने के लिए. सो यू कैन मेक यूज़ ऑफ दिस पोर्टल विच इज़ अवेलेबल, विच वॉज अवेलेबल फ्रीली इन एनी केस टू एवरी वन, एंड आई एम श्योर मे बी अवेलेबल नाउ ऑल्सो फ्रीली टू एवरी वन. एंड देन आवर ओन IPA ऑफ ICSI, मैं देखता हूँ कि हमारा जो IPA है ICSI का, they also have been contributing very significantly from time to time in the forms of lot of material, online material, and that also you can make use of it. अब एक सवाल जो आप सभी पूछना चाहेंगे कि कितने वीक तैयारी करना चाहिए, हाउ मच प्रिपरेशन टू गिव. अब मेरे ख्याल से ये जो एग्ज़ाम है इसको फोकस्ड अटेंशन की ज़रूरत है. और जब मैं बोलता हूँ ये एग्ज़ाम, यानी कि वैल्यूएशन का एग्ज़ाम और इंसॉल्वेंसी का एग्ज़ाम, दोनों एग्ज़ाम को फोकस्ड अटेंशन करने की ज़रूरत है. यानी कि क्या, यानी कि आप कोशिश करिए कि आपकी प्रैक्टिस में से आप 2-3 हफ्ते का समय एक्सक्लूसिवली निकाल पाएँ, या फिर क्या करें कि 1-2 घंटे ऑफिस में काम करें, बाकी सारा जो टाइम है वो आप एक्सक्लूसिवली फॉर द प्रिपरेशन ऑफ इंसॉल्वेंसी एग्ज़ाम और फॉर द प्रिपरेशन ऑफ वैल्यूएशन एग्ज़ाम के लिए स्पेंड करें. उससे क्या होगा, फोकस्ड अटेंशन होने की वजह से आपकी तैयारी बहुत स्ट्रांग होगी. एंड दैट इज़ वॉट आई वुड वेरी स्ट्रांगली सजेस्ट. मैं एक चीज़ और सजेस्ट करूँगा कि अगर हो सकता है आपके लिए पॉसिबल है और आपको टाइम का बहुत बड़ा चैलेंज नहीं है, तो मैं ये सजेस्ट करूँगा कि आप ये दोनों एग्ज़ाम साथ साथ एनरोल करिए, क्योंकि काफ़ी सारा कोर्स करिकुलम, अबाउट 30-35% कोर्स करिकुलम कॉमन है. तो एक कोर्स की तैयारी करेंगे तो पार्टली दूसरे कोर्स की तैयारी ऑटोमेटिकली हो जाएगी. तो और किसको मालूम है कि एक के साथ एक फ्री वाला सिस्टम यहाँ पर भी चालू हो जाए. सो दिस इज व्हाट इट इज. नाउ लेट अस कम टू हाउ टू राइट द एग्जाम. ओके, सो फ्रेंड्स, व्हाट वी हैव टू डू, नंबर 1, friends, we might overshoot by 5 minutes. It's 4:56 in my watch, and I think another 10 minutes we should be able to complete the entire presentation and permitting, we might take some questions also. सो एग्ज़ाम कंप्यूटर के आप सामने बैठे हैं, तो मैं आपको बताऊं कि ये जो एग्ज़ाम बनाया है बहुत ही यूज़र फ्रेंडली है, बहुत ही यूज़र फ्रेंडली है, और बड़ा ही सिस्टमेटिक है। आपको बिल्कुल भी कंफ्यूज होने की ज़रूरत नहीं है, बहुत सिंपल है। और क्या होता है, जैसे आपके सामने एक एक करके क्वेश्चन आएंगे, जैसे आप क्लिक करेंगे एक क्वेश्चन आपके सामने आ जाएगा। अब आपको क्या करना है, ध्यान से सुनिए। एक क्वेश्चन आपके सामने आया है ना, क्योंकि इसमें याद रखिए इसमें प्रोविज़न है। क्या प्रोविज़न है कि आप एक क्वेश्चन को अगर आंसर करना चाहते हैं तो आपको तुरंत उसको आंसर कर सकते हैं। अगर आप उसको पेंडिंग रखना चाहते हैं तो आप उसको पेंडिंग के लिए मार्क कर सकते हैं, राइट। तो टू रिव्यू लेटर के लिए मार्क कर सकते हैं, तो वो एक अलग जगह जाके बैठ जाएगा वो क्वेश्चन, और वो उस ग्रुप में आप जाके मतलब जा सकते हैं और फिर से उन क्वेश्चन को देख सकते हैं। और अगर आपको कोई क्वेश्चन को अटेम्प्ट नहीं करना है तो आप बिल्कुल छोड़ सकते हैं। तो अब देखिए क्या करना है आपको। आपको सबसे पहले पहला क्वेश्चन आपके सामने आया, ठीक है। आपने उसके जो ऑप्शंस हैं चारों ऑप्शन पढ़े। चारों ऑप्शन के पढ़ने से पहले आपको मालूम पड़ गया कि इसका आंसर ए है या बी है या सी है या डी है, ठीक है। थोड़ा सा एक बार पक्का कर लीजिए कि आप आंसर के बारे में कॉन्फिडेंट हैं, और वो आप आंसर कर दीजिए, क्लिक कर दीजिए। कहने का क्या मतलब है, ध्यान से सुनिए। कहने का मतलब यह है कि जब आप पहली बार जब आंसर करना शुरू करेंगे ना, तो उन्हीं क्वेश्चंस को आंसर करिए जिनके बारे में आपको 100% भरोसा है। 100% नहीं, 200% भरोसा है कि इस क्वेश्चन का आंसर मुझे 200% मालूम है, राइट। तो अब एक एक करके क्वेश्चन आपके सामने आते जाएंगे। एक क्वेश्चन आपके दूसरा क्वेश्चन आपके सामने आया, आपने उसके ऑप्शंस पढ़े, इमीडिएटली आपको मालूम पड़ा कि ये क्वेश्चन का मुझे आंसर 100% मालूम है, 200% मालूम है, 100% मालूम है। आप उसको आंसर करिए, अगले क्वेश्चन पे जाइए। तीसरे नंबर का क्वेश्चन आया, वो आपने पढ़ा। अब आपको लगा कि यार ये क्वेश्चन का आंसर याद तो है पर तुरंत याद में नहीं आ रहा है, तो क्या करिए, इसको रिव्यू के लिए मार्क कर दीजिए। तो ये क्वेश्चन जाकर रिव्यू वाले बॉक्स में बैठ जाएगा, तो छोड़ दीजिए। क्योंकि याद रखिए इस एग्ज़ाम में गैस वर्क आपको बिल्कुल नहीं करना है, मटका बिल्कुल नहीं लगाना है। बिकॉज ये एक एग्ज़ाम में मटका बिल्कुल भी चलता नहीं है। जब भी आप मटका लगाएंगे दुर्भाग्य से वो उल्टा ही पड़ने वाला है, इसलिए बिल्कुल भी गैस वर्क मत करिए। क्योंकि बहुत सारे लोग जो पास हो सकते थे इसलिए फेल हो जाते हैं क्योंकि गैस वर्क करके आते हैं। तो करते जाइए। अच्छा, तीसरा क्वेश्चन आया जिसका कि आपको आंसर डाउटफुल है, रिव्यू के लिए छोड़ दीजिए। चौथा क्वेश्चन आया, आपने क्वेश्चन को पढ़ा और आपको 100% नहीं 1000% भरोसा है कि ये क्वेश्चन का आंसर आपको बिल्कुल भी मालूम नहीं है। इस क्वेश्चन को छोड़ दीजिए, जस्ट लेट इट, लीव इट कम्प्लीटली। सो ये क्वेश्चन पे दोबारा आने का ही नहीं। क्यों इस क्वेश्चन को दोबारा पढ़ोगे, दोबारा टाइम खराब करो। याद रखो कि 2 घंटे का समय है और पढ़ते समय भी आपका टाइम तो जाता ही है। चौथे क्वेश्चन को आप छोड़ दीजिए। ऐसा करते जाइए करते जाइए करते जाइए, पूरे करते 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 आप 100वें क्वेश्चन पे पहुंच जाएंगे। 100वें क्वेश्चन को आंसर कर लीजिए जो भी है। अब देखिए, अब आप चेक कर सकते हैं कि आपने कितने क्वेश्चंस को आंसर किया है, ठीक है। आप ये भी चेक कर सकते हैं कि कितने क्वेश्चंस को आपने रिव्यू के लिए छोड़ा हुआ है। और बाय डिफ़ॉल्ट बाकी के जो सारे क्वेश्चन हैं वो क्वेश्चन आपने छोड़ दिए हैं, उनका आंसर आपको देना नहीं है क्योंकि उनका आंसर आपको मालूम नहीं। अब ये करने के बाद देखिए कि जिन क्वेश्चंस को आपने आंसर किया है उसका टोटल कितना आ रहा है। अगर उसका टोटल 65 एंड अबव है, इसका मतलब क्या है, इसका मतलब ये है कि आप उत्तीर्ण हो चुके हैं, आप पास हो चुके हैं। क्यों? क्योंकि आपने इस राउंड में उन्हीं क्वेश्चंस को आंसर किया था जिन क्वेश्चंस के बारे में आपको 200% भरोसा था कि आपको उनका आंसर मालूम है। 65% 65% का टोटल आपको दिख रहा है आपको। तो आप क्या करिए, अब जो रिव्यू के लिए क्वेश्चन छोड़े थे उसमें अगर टाइम बचा है आपके पास में, तो रिव्यू वाले क्वेश्चंस को एक बार दोबारा से देख लीजिए। उसमें से हो सकता है कुछ क्वेश्चंस का आपको आंसर अब याद आ जाए। तो अगर आपको याद आ जाता है और पक्के भरोसे वाला है तो आप उसको आंसर कर लीजिए। बटन दबा दीजिए, गॉड बी विद यू। आपकी सामने स्क्रीन पर मैसेज आ जाएगा, कॉन्ग्रेचुलेशंस यू हैव पास द एग्ज़ाम। घर से एग्ज़ाम हॉल से बाहर निकलिए, 1 किलो मिठाई का डब्बा लीजिए और सबको मिठाई बांटिए। क्यों? क्योंकि इंसॉल्वेंसी का एग्ज़ाम और बैंक्रप्सी का एग्ज़ाम पास करना आज की तारीख में बड़ा अचीवमेंट है, बड़ा अचीवमेंट है। सिचुएशन नंबर 2, आपने प्रोसेस यही फॉलो किया, कौन सा प्रोसेस फॉलो किया? आपने उन्हीं क्वेश्चंस को आंसर किया जिनके बारे में आपको 2% तक का भरोसा है कि ये आंसर मुझे मालूम है, और जिनके बारे में डाउट था उनको रिव्यू के लिए छोड़ दिया, जिनके बारे में आपको मालूम है कि नहीं मालूम है उनको पूरा छोड़ दिया। ये करते 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 जब एंड में आ गए, अब आप चेक करिए कि जो आंसर आपने किए हैं उनका टोटल कितना दिखता है। तो अगर उसका टोटल 55 दिखता है या उसके ऊपर दिखता है, इसका मतलब क्या है? इसका मतलब ये कि आप हो भी गए और नहीं भी हुए। मतलब अब जो रिव्यू के लिए जो आपने क्वेश्चन छोड़े थे, वो क्वेश्चन पे जरा निगाह घुमाइए। यूजिंग द लॉ ऑफ एलिमिनेशन, try and give answers to as many questions as possible without really doing any guesswork, right? तो करिए, और be with God, be with you. So maybe after doing certain following the law of elimination, आपने वो एग्जाम दिया, वो आंसर्स किए, एंड बटन दबाइए, बी गॉड बी विद यू ट्वाइस दिस टाइम, एंड हो सकता है आपके सामने मैसेज खुल जाए, कॉन्ग्रेचुलेशन यू हैव पास द एग्जाम। एग्जाम हॉल से बाहर निकलिए, 2 किलो मिठाई का डब्बा लीजिए और सबको बांटिए। क्यों? क्योंकि आप फेल होते होते पास हो गए। तीसरी सिचुएशन, आपका जो टोटल आ रहा है दैट इज कमिंग टू 45, जिसका बारे में आपको कॉन्फिडेंस है कि आपने सही आंसर किया है, 45 है। अब और कुछ मत करिए, ना तो लेफ्ट को देखिए ना राइट को देखिए, चुपचाप से अपना सारा मटेरियल उठाइए और घर जाइए, बाकी का जो समय है आगे की तैयारी में लगाइए। क्यों? क्योंकि 45 अगर आपका स्कोर है तो आप कितना भी गैस वर्क करें या कितना भी लॉ ऑफ लिमिटेशन एलिमिनेशन लगाएं, आप उसको पास नहीं कर पाएंगे, मुश्किल होगा। तो बजाय इसके कि समय खराब करें, उस समय का अच्छा इस्तेमाल करिए। सो दिस इज हाउ फ्रेंड्स यू विल बी एबल टू स्पेंड दोज 2 hours in front of your computer, and I'm sure if you do that you will definitely be able to pass the exam, right? So what are the opportunities for the insolvency professionals? Of course I have already covered them. So you can act as an insolvency professional, you can do the liquidation, you can be an advisor, you can provide support services, you can be an author, you can be a faculty, you can be a trainer, you can arrange finances, you can help people in preparing information memorandum, you can help insolvency professional in preparing the resolution plan, you can be an advisor to the people who are submitting resolution plan. So the scope is for the insolvency professional is far and wide, and with the introduction of cross border insolvency, this scope is still widening. So that is what you can do. What are the skill sets that you need? Leadership is number one. So you have to be a leader, because if you are appointed as IRP of a company, you are a chief executive officer of that company. You have to deal with so many people. So leadership is number one. Number two, your understanding and purpose of business has to be very, very strong. Your understanding of legal and financial framework has to be very, very strong. You should have acumen to turn the businesses around. You should have a drive to create value, ability to network with everybody, and more than that, you should have a very good understanding of the economy of this country, and you should also have very good understanding of your own role as a professional in growth of the economy. Now this is what you would need, skill sets that you would need, plus you must have good organizational skills. That means what? That means as an insolvency professional, remember, it's not a one-man's job, it's a team job. So you will need to also build an organization. So with this, friends, we come to the close of the session. It is exactly 5:05 in my watch. Thank you so much. Thank you WIRC of ICSI. Thank you Rajesh bhai, thank you Ashish bhai, thank you everyone, and thank you all the participants for listening to me with so much of patience. And I wish all of you pass this exam in earliest of your attempt, and do well as an insolvency professional, do well as a valuation professional, and make a huge contribution to the economy of this country. Thank you so much.